Did the action item on paper seem pretty straightforward?
Yes.
Was it actually straightforward?
No. Hard no.
Okay.
How's it going, y'all? Aiden Anderson here with the Moscow Minutes. I didn't ask for a streak of spicy government meetings, by the way, but boy, are we getting them. Let me try to ease you into it. Let's start with the county. Every month, the county hosts a meeting with all its elected officials and department heads to receive county-wide updates from the past few weeks and go over important items with leadership as a whole. This month, the commissioners and the head of ITS focused on reviewing the county's internal technology request form, a form which all departments need to submit when purchasing new tech with their own budget money, and which acts as a safeguard on the county when it comes to tech security. Among the meeting's other highlights, the clerk gave a brief overview of the turnout from the recent primary election in May, and the Solid Waste Department head reminded everyone about Tire Amnesty Day, which falls on June 29th. Beyond that, the county commissioners held a brief discussion about a possible correction to the approved salary for the district court staff attorney position at the county. While it was originally their intention to update the salary based on numbers they had previously laid out within the parameters of the county budget, they realized that in the process of speaking to the local court judges recently, they had actually provided another different salary estimate. With the two salary numbers being held in conflict for the purposes of this meeting, the commissioners decided to hold this item for a future date where a decision could be made with a more complete data set. Now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at this here city meeting. What we had at the start of this Moscow City Council meeting was a genuine novelty decision. Back in 2016, the Board of Adjustment approved a conditional use permit for the construction of a school and church on Mountain View Road, along with public improvements to support the development, including the construction of a new public street adjacent to the property as part of a right-of-way dedication. Typically, when a new street is created, a street name would be approved through the conditional use permit platting process, but since this new road was created as part of a right-of-way dedication, the street name was not a part of this platting process and so needs to be approved separately. Let me just emphasize that this separate approval of the street name is the new thing here. All street names need to be approved by the city at some point, and that's usually together with all the other development and construction plans. But with the way this new street was created, the council ended up with a unicorn on their hands. The initial name proposed by the applicant was Logos Street. That name was found to go against the city's street naming guidelines, which include rules such as no duplication of names, no close spelling or varieties of similar names, and no references to individual persons, businesses, or organizations except those with significant historical or civic interest. As the school in question being built is called Logos School, the name Logos Street would therefore not meet the criteria. So, the applicant proposed the name Dominion Way for the street, and that was the name that was up for discussion. Let's turn to the council for their initial impressions of the name Dominion Way.
I have reservations of approving this for a variety of reasons. I think the word Dominion just has a pretty heavily weighted context to it, and I was looking up the definitions, which I relayed last week at Public Works and Finance. And the definition of dominion is sovereignty or control, the territory of a sovereign or government. And then I was curious, so I looked up synonyms for dominion. They include, but are not limited to, supremacy, ascendancy, dominance, superiority, preeminence, authority, mastery, control, command, etc. And so in thinking about kind of like the weight of all of those words, it makes me nervous to recommend approval on this, especially considering all of the streets that we have in our street directory that have no kind of similar weight or feel as Dominion. And I just would want to stay more consistent with kind of the maybe precedent we've already set, as opposed to opening up this new door that could lead to potentially some words that maybe are more uncomfortable. So with that being said, I know that they follow the guidelines, which I'm appreciative of, but I am not intend to approve, just for the record.
This is a difficult thing to have this as proposed as a name because of the reasons that Councilmember Blankenship has mentioned. but it does meet the guidelines. So I feel a little bit like we're stuck with it. But I would like to see the city go back and revise those guidelines and in the future and try to tighten that up and just have a clearer, simpler version of what street names can be.
I'm not particularly bothered by the word Dominion. I tend to be a little bit more of a circumspect thinker. That's respectfully said. I don't have the same heartburn that War Bonnet would bring as well, and that's not. I can't claim credit for that wisdom, but I can use it. They did meet all the guidelines are met. And so in my mind, this is a less than optimal name, but I'm in favor of approving it.
Yes. I agree completely with what Gina said. I don't like it very much. I don't like the context of it. I don't like it for all the reasons Bryce said. I also looked up some definitions and it left me feeling not great. But then I also had to remember that when Indian Hills went in, that was not great. And that went through and that also still doesn't sit right, but it met the criteria. War Bonnet is pretty awful. Really not even pretty awful. It's awful. It's an awful name for so many reasons. It does meet the criteria, and that's, I would say, one of the hardest things about our job is when everything is correct and everything is right, just because you don't like it, how it sounds, how it feels, it's still right. And so I think we have to go with it. And I would go with what Julia said as well, that maybe we can look at different ways to come up with a better consensus on how a name is, because a lot of those are pretty tough to take going through town.
Yeah, I think there's, like usual, some wisdom come behind the bench here. I agree with, I see all viewpoints on this. I have personal opinions, but my job as a council member is not is to think of the best interest of the city. And so I think what Julie has said is, it makes sense. And where we draw the line in the sand is it meets the requirements. And so when this is called to an action, you will see how I vote. So
I am going to disagree. There are checks and balances in a system on purpose. It is within the purview, including and on Public Works. I made these same comments. It is within the council's jurisdiction. I have no qualms with the staff recommendation. It does meet all the criteria. However, I was elected and on the promise that I would create a more inclusive and welcoming town. And this is a check in our system to allow us to vet it. And I think it's appropriate for us to ask for additional direction in the code. My understanding is there is some draft code to further refine and massage what I think has been untouched in terms of some of these guidances for a long time. And so I'm game to also ask for that. But I'm not a fan, and it is here before us for us to make a decision, and staff would not ask us for our opinion if we did not, staff wouldn't, this mechanism would not be in place for us to review it if all we were supposed to do was rubber stamp every single staff recommendation. And so I think it is well within our role. It is appropriate as a check to the system, and in the best interest of the city. To your point, Drew, I don't think this name is in the best interest of further growth on the east side of town and beyond whatever comes beyond this road. So I am not a fan, and I would like to see the applicant provide other names, because I don't think it is appropriate. I am concerned about the message it sends based on the definition alone. And again, it is within our purview to ask for something else and not approve it.
These comments were immediately followed by a motion to deny the name by Haley Lewis, with a second from Bryce Blankenship. This motion failed to pass on a 4-2 vote, and was followed by a motion to approve the name by Gina Terruccio, which, because there was no second to the motion, also failed. The council turned to deliberate further. Drew Davis asked about the history of the city's denial of street names. City Supervisor Bill Belknap answered that in the past, street names have changed due to the similarity of names and changes in street direction. However, name changes due to the substance of the name itself had not taken place in the past 20 years. War Bonnet Drive and Indian Hills Drive were cited as examples of potentially controversial names that were in fact approved in the past. Sandra Kelly asked for clarification on future actions if the council did not want to take action on this particular name tonight, and received the answer that inaction would be, in effect, a decision on the name itself. Bryce Blankenship expressed concerns over setting a dangerous precedent for future controversial street names if they were not careful with this one. Again, Haley Lewis made a motion to deny the name, and again, this motion failed to pass 4-2. This was shortly followed by a motion to approve the name by Drew Davis, who got a second from Gina Teruscio. This motion passed 4-2, with Haley Lewis and Bryce Blankenship being the dissenting votes, and with some additional comments from Julia Parker about the possibility of revising the city's street naming requirements going forward. The remaining items on the agenda were a good deal simpler to process. Firstly, the acceptance of a grant award in the amount of $45,000 to help the city purchase electronic ticketing equipment for police vehicles. Second, the filing of a grant application for a grant worth $100,000 to help fund the city's water meter replacement project. Both of these items were approved unanimously by the Moscow City Council. That street naming item has to be one of the wilder rides I've seen the council take in recent weeks. It just goes to show that you can never quite anticipate what direction a particular discussion is going to take. All the more reason to pay attention to your local goings-on, which is why I'm here. As always, we'll have the relevant links posted with this video, and if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm Aiden Anderson with the Moscow Minutes. We'll see you next time.